Hey everybody, let's talk Portuguese.
Tudo vai ficar bem.
In today's video, we're going to be talking about Portuguese verbs, more specifically the future subjunctive tense. But before we get into that, if you enjoy Portuguese, linguistics, and other things like that, and you'd like to continue the conversation, you can do so on the Discord server for the channel. I have an invite link to the channel's Discord server in the description of my videos, as well as directly on my channel, and from there are some simple steps to access the Discord. The Discord is a place where you can talk with other people who share similar interests, and if you are looking to improve your English or your Portuguese, it's a great opportunity to do so with people who are friendly and willing to help you out with that. So if that's something you'd be interested in, I look forward to chatting with you on the Discord. Also, if you're enjoying the videos that I make on my channel, I have a Patreon for my channel. Patreon is basically like a tip jar for the channel, so if you'd like to support me with $1 or more, you can do so on Patreon. So if that's something you'd be interested in, you can head on over to patreon.com/Sashinka and find out all of the info. And speaking of streaming schedule, I have been doing lives on my channel as of the time that I'm filming this video. I have done 5 lives so far, and it's a great opportunity to answer your questions about Portuguese, linguistics, cultural things involving Portugal, Spain, the US, and so on. And just in case you can't make it to one of my lives or you only make it to part of one, the videos stay up on my channel afterwards so you can catch up. And I'm doing them about once or twice a month. With that being said, let's get on to the video. In today's video, we're going to be talking about Portuguese verbs, and we're going to be talking about the Portuguese verb tenses that make Portuguese so unique. So today's video is going to be focused mostly on the future subjunctive, but we will talk briefly about the personal infinitive as well. Among all of the major Romance languages, Portuguese is unique in terms of its verbs. Portuguese retains more actively used verb forms than the other major Romance languages. In this respect, it can be considered a conservative Romance language. Of course, all of those verb forms come from Latin. The Romance languages have reanalyzed Latin verbs, each in their own ways, but there are many similarities among them. One of the ways that we can look at this in modern Portuguese is looking at what are known as primitive verbs and derived verbs. This has to do with how the verbs themselves are conjugated. The primitive forms of the verbs are the basic forms of the verb conjugations, and these primitive verbal forms usually correspond to their Latin equivalents. Primitive verb forms in Portuguese are the present indicative, the past indicative, and the infinitive. And the so-called derived verbal forms in Portuguese are those conjugations which use one of the 3 primitive forms as their base. From there, the base form is modified with different suffixes to indicate different verbal tenses. And it is from this base that we have all of the many different verbal inflections in Portuguese. Inflections are, of course, just the conjugations and all of the different endings that can appear at the end of verbs. And you might be wondering why the future subjunctive and even the personal infinitive are so special in Portuguese if they're not primitive verb forms in the language. The reason for this is that these are verbal forms that are not in widespread usage in any other major Romance language. They appear in some regional Romance vernaculars, but in terms of the major Romance languages, Portuguese is unique. But it wasn't always the case. The future subjunctive was used in medieval Spanish, and it was a fairly common verb tense. But over time, the future subjunctive came to be replaced in Spanish speech with other verbal tenses. Nowadays, the future subjunctive in Spanish is limited primarily to legal uses of language. It also appears in more archaic uses of language, such as some editions of the Bible. And the use of the future subjunctive in legal texts has a specific meaning. It's not the same to use the future subjunctive in Spanish as it is to use the present tense. The future subjunctive in legal texts in Spanish is used to denote a certain uncertainty or improbability of an action occurring. In modern Portuguese, in if phrases, we resolve this by the difference in usage between the future subjunctive and the imperfect subjunctive. If we use the imperfect subjunctive in an if phrase, we're denoting improbability. If we use the future subjunctive, we're denoting the future or a probable occurrence. So the uses between Spanish and Portuguese of the future subjunctive are also different. In Portuguese, the future subjunctive has a largely future quality. Although it is considered part of the subjunctive mood, in Portuguese, the future subjunctive does not denote uncertainty or subjectiveness. sameness. And the reason that we have the future subjunctive as the subjunctive goes back to how the future subjunctive came to be in Portuguese. The future subjunctive descends from two different verb forms in Latin. And so the future subjunctive tense in Portuguese descends from the indicative future perfect tense in Latin, as well as the subjunctive perfect tense. Both of these verb tenses in Latin were conjugated in a fairly similar way, and over the course of time with these shifts in Vulgar Latin, they came to be more and more similar. So the most widely accepted origin of the future subjunctive is that these two Latin verb tenses fused together as the verb forms became simplified over time. It took the future from the future indicative in the passive voice or will be forms of the verb, and from there it falls under the subjunctive mood from the subjunctive perfect in Latin. The personal infinitive for its part in Portuguese descends from the imperfect subjunctive in Latin. The imperfect subjunctive in Latin was formed using the infinitive form as its basis. And so from this we can see that even from Vulgar Latin, these two verb forms, the personal infinitive and the future subjunctive, although they appear to be quite similar, are not quite the same origin. And Portuguese, unlike Spanish, uses the future subjunctive quite a lot. It is an indispensable part of Portuguese as it is used, and it appears that it will continue to be so. So I hope you enjoyed this overview of unique Portuguese verb forms, namely the future subjunctive, as well as a little bit about the personal infinitive. And of course, if you'd like me to make more videos about simpler topics like this in the future, let me know in a comment down below. So that's all I've got for this video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, if you learned something or otherwise found it interesting, leave me a thumbs up down below. If you enjoyed this or any of my other videos, make sure you're subscribed to my channel. I post lots of videos about the Portuguese language, which you can find directly on my channel or in the eye above, and I will see you next time.